welcome back to Cities on Console. Welcome if you are new. Today, we will be diving deep into the Climate and Seasons Dev Diary. We learned a little bit about climate and seasons previously in our featured highlights reaction video. For example, we learned that the climates and weather our cities face will be largely based on their geographical location, just like in the real world. But today, we will be getting into some of the finer details and possibly even uncovering some secrets along the way. Before getting into the video, however, I want to ask you to consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already, and to drop a like if you end up enjoying today's video or finding it informative. And, as always, please also feel free to drop a dislike if not, as any and all engagement is welcome and helps me improve the channel and make more of the content you all find helpful, entertaining, and worthwhile. But, without further ado, let's get into the Cities Skylines 2 Climate and Seasons Dev Diary. So the article starts by saying, in Cities Skylines, maps had different themes that changed the visual atmosphere and environment to represent different climates, but maps using the same theme would work the same, meaning two boreal cities would experience the same climate or length of day. In Cities Skylines 2, however, we have replaced that system with a whole new feature in the form of climates. It brings changing seasons to the game and makes each map a unique gaming experience with its own climate that is based on real-world locations ranging from the Finnish countryside in the north to Brisbane in the south. Climate controls the changing seasons, length of the day, and weather patterns so they match the seasons and latitude of the map. And then we get into our first image here, and it's telling us enjoy the unique atmosphere of each map and their climates. And as always here, really good looking assets. Really appreciate the buildings, all of the lighting effects. The water looks great. The sky looks really nice as well. A couple little clouds here, but other than that, just a beautiful sunrise or sunset. But yeah, as always, looks really good so far. And moving on, we start by getting into climate and weather. The game features different types of climates with various characteristics unique to each map. Climates are based on latitude and longitude, resulting in differences in the length of day and amount of sunlight, as well as other elements such as temperature range, amount of cloud coverage, and precipitation. Those parameters mean all maps will introduce different climates with 4 distinct seasons. Okay, so it sounds like we are going to experience all 4 of the seasons on all of these maps, but the length of those seasons, the amount of precipitation, the actual range of temperatures, all of that, just as it just said, is going to vary greatly based on the latitude and longitude. So that makes sense. Very realistic. Definitely keeping with the theme of realism that they're clearly going for with Cities Skylines 2. Compared to just the arcade experience, you could say, of Cities Skylines 1. Climates can be ground into 3 basic climate types that act as a foundation for each map's unique characteristics. Maps based on the temperate climate have distinct seasonal changes, moderate precipitation, and a wide temperature range, while maps with the continental climate type introduce significant annual variations in temperature. Lastly, we have the polar regions, which feature a short and cold summer and a long-lasting cold winter. You may recognize which category a map falls into based on its displayed temperature range. But as climates are customized for each map, you will experience significant differences between maps that fall into the continental group. Fun fact, many maps' climates are based on real-world locations. For example, River Delta is based on Shanghai, and Lakeland on the Finnish city of, and I am not Finnish, but I'm going to say Savonlinna. Please, if anyone on here knows better, please correct me if I'm wrong in the comments down below. But moving on, weather is closely tied to the climate and represents the climate's seasonal changes. Each map features unique weather, which changes with the simulation. You can encounter various intensities of rainy weather, different cloud coverage, temperature changes, etc. Okay, so far, everything's all pretty straightforward. You know, weather's different in different locations. Nothing really crazy to go over here, and nothing so far worth noting outside of what we already know from the featured highlights video a few days ago. But we do get our second image here, stating citizens prefer to stay indoors on cold or rainy days and enjoy outdoor activities more during sunny days. So that's cool. Again, we talked about that the other day with the featured highlights video. I do think that adds a level of depth to the realism and Just makes it a little bit cooler of an experience. You know, you'll see a lot less people out in the rain and the snow, and a lot more people out on a nice, bright, sunny day out in the parks and, you know, beaches and that type of thing, I would imagine. So, yeah, really cool. I'm looking forward to that. And again, here we have a really nice looking shot of some good looking buildings. A really cool bridge asset you can see in the background on the left there. Nice little railing on what appears to be some sort of pedestrian path or a pier that we're essentially standing on in this shot, I guess. One thing I find really interesting, this tiny little pointy building here. You can only see the top of it. It looks like a church steeple or something. It's this very narrow and very thin and high structure. Again, it looks kind of like the steeple of a church to me. So I'm interested to find out what that is. If maybe that's one of the landmarks or unique buildings we don't know about yet. But it looks really great with the skyline, especially right there in front of that, you know, kind of mountains in the background. Really good looking shot here. And getting back into the article, the weather has gameplay effects. For example, temperature and the amount of rain or sun affects citizens' behaviors when they are deciding if they want to use a park or indoor leisure activities. Citizens prefer indoor activities when the temperature is low or it is raining. Temperatures also realistically affect the city's energy consumption, with hot water increasing the energy consumption as the city needs AC to keep cool. In cold weather, the city needs heating, causing energy consumption to increase again then. So again, this is kind of just reiterating things we've already talked about. But again, it's quite cool, the realism aspect to it. I like that you're going to have to manage the city's energy needs based on the temperatures. That was already a thing, of course, in Cities 1. So I'm happy to see that back, plus a whole new level of depth added to all of that with the different lengths of days and seasons and the climates and all that. Should make that a pretty interesting game mechanic. And then we get into time and seasons. With both a day and night cycle and seasons at release, Cities Skylines 2 handles time differently than its predecessor. One cycle through day and night equals 1 month, and each season lasts about 3 months, with 1 year in the game taking 12 in-game days. The length of the day-night cycle is based on the map's climate and current season, with nights being longer during the winter. As the sun sets, the building lights and street lights come on, lighting the way for citizens. So that's quite cool. One thing that's very different here from the original game is, the night cycle came as a part of the After Dark DLC, and then we had little bits of weather-related stuff, like we had the Snowfall DLC, but we never really had seasons or anything like that. The day-night cycle itself even was really just a cosmetic thing, as was, I guess, the Snowfall DLC, right? Like if you played on a winter-themed map, it was just winter all the time. Everything was covered in snow. That actually drove me a little bit nuts. One of my favorite maps, or actually a couple of my favorite maps, in theory, in the original Cities Skylines, were winter-themed maps that came as a part of that DLC. But I just got so over them because everything was so white and it just got really bland and boring and dull after a while. So to have that actual change in seasonality is going to be super awesome. You'll get to appreciate those nice, snowy, white Christmas winters, while also being able to cycle through it and enjoy the rest as well. But anyway, we'll get into our first image here. It says, experience rush hours as the day comes to an end and settles into a calm night. Yeah, so it does sound like their life cycles are going to be largely impacted by the day and night cycle as well. You will have essentially rush hour traffic to contend with in the mornings and in the evenings. So I think that's pretty cool and adds some realism to the game as well. And this shot right here is just absolutely gorgeous. I love the northern lights there in the background. That's amazing. And again, as always, the assets look really great. Everything from these little houses here to the high rises. You can see here, there's a little Ferris wheel there. I don't know if that's like a little London Eye action going on right there, but yeah, it looks really nice. Looks like it might be a bit wintry here. It looks like the mountains might be covered in snow. There might be, I can't really tell if that's just the colors of the roofs or if they're actually kind of covered in snow here as well. That's why it's all white looking. Yeah, either way, really good looking stuff. And then it tells us that seasons affect more than just the amount of sunlight in a day. Depending on the climate, Temperature changes over the course of the whole year, as does the chance of rain and cloud coverage. During cold months, snow falls and covers the ground of maps with climates that include cold seasons. When there is snow, the road maintenance building snowplows take care of excess snow on the roads, keeping up the road condition to reduce the risk of accidents. The map's location plays an important role when it comes to seasons, as cities located in the southern hemisphere experience the seasons at opposite times of the year compared to the northern hemisphere. I quite like that because that's realistic as well. I wonder though, in the game, if that's really going to have any impact other than maybe like you start in a different season, because you're still going to go through the same sort of cycle, right? It's still going to come in the same order. The cycle just sort of starts at a different point, right? So that'll be interesting to find out if that does have any sort of impact on the game at all. It did mention here, though, climates that include cold seasons. So very clearly, there will be maps that do not have snowy winters. I imagine that might also mean there won't be very hot summers on some maps. Some maps will have more extreme heat in the summers and extreme cold in the winters. Some might have less and be very temperate and not have that much change throughout the year at all. So I think that's quite cool and adds another level to the different building experience you can have on all the different maps available. And I really like this image here. It says, keep your citizens warm and your roads clear as snow blankets the city. So this one's really pretty here. The snowfall itself, even the snowflakes have their own kind of individual shapes. You see, it's not like too much of a pattern or too video game looking. And actually it looks like there's some ice forming on the water. Maybe that's just like some foam from the waves. I'm not entirely sure, but if there's some ice forming on the lakes and rivers and things like that, that'd be really interesting. But again, really good looking, nice looking bridge. The ship here looks beautiful. I really like this here, this little shot with the quay wall. I think we saw essentially the same picture recently, maybe from a slightly different angle, and definitely in a different season. And I'm really excited to get that kind of variation in views in my own cities. Should be really cool. And the time and seasons section ends by saying that, like in Cities Skylines, the game speed is adjustable with 3 speed options to choose from, as well as the option to pause the game at any time. When the game is playing at normal speed, the in-game day is a bit over an hour in real life. At the highest speed, the in-game day is 1/3 of the normal speed in real life. Wait, what? That's confusing. Okay, so I guess that's just a really confusing way to say it's 1/3 the speed. It's 1/3 the speed of normal time. Okay. Cool. And then we get into natural disasters, which I know for surprisingly more people than I thought is an interesting subject. I'm not a huge fan of the natural disasters myself. I don't want them coming through destroying my beautiful creations that I spend way too much time on detailing and putting together. So, but anyway, it's interesting to know. It's a cool game mechanic. I'm glad it's available, and I know a lot of people do enjoy it, especially those that are more like on the strategy side of city builders rather than the design side of it. That's one great thing about city builders. They kind of have something to offer to all kinds of different gamers. So, but anyway, let's get into it before I get off on a rant here. So, natural disasters. Beyond the normal weather phenomenon, Cities Skylines 2 includes natural disasters, adding random events and challenging gameplay. Disasters can be switched on or off when starting a new game or loading an existing save. Cool. So we suspected this because it's kind of the same as in Cities 1. If you do like playing with the disasters on, you can just leave it on. If you don't, you turn it off. But also mid-game, you play, you build a nice city, and then, who knows, maybe you get bored out of nowhere at some point. You can turn disasters on just to shake things up. So cool that that's always sort of an option to turn on or off mid-game instead of having to be stuck with your decision when you get started. But getting back into it, disasters can affect your city in many ways, and while you can prepare for possible natural disasters with disaster control systems, they can't be avoided completely. On the mild end of the spectrum, disasters might cause traffic accidents that lead to traffic jams, which can further affect your service's ability to respond to the disaster. They cause damage to buildings and citizens directly hit by the disaster, which burdens healthcare, death care, and rescue services and causes disruptions to the companies or services housed in the affected buildings. Natural disasters are logged into the Event Journal, which can be found in the right side panel of the main UI. The journal includes past events in chronological order and information about what happened, when it happened, and what outcome the event had. Cool. And then we get into our first type of natural disaster, which is the forest fire. Forest fires can happen in all climates, though the risk of a forest fire happening is affected by precipitation level and temperature. For example, dry weather has a higher risk of forest fires breaking out. A forest fire near buildings can spread to them, causing building fires and wreaking havoc in the city. It is important to take care of forest fires to prevent harm to your cities. You can prepare for forest fires by placing fire watch towers on the map. They decrease forest fire probability and firefighters' response time within their range, limiting the fallout if a forest fire should happen. Fire trucks can extinguish a fire when it reaches the road network, but placing a firefighting helicopter depot in your city helps to put out the fire in places where fire trucks have no access. Cool, okay, so this all kind of returns from the first game as well. Again, something I didn't really play with too much. But I know we had the firefighting helicopter depot, we had the firewatch towers, that's all kind of just coming back, so I'm sure those of you who do like playing with disasters, pretty familiar with all of that. And it tells us here, make sure your firefighting helicopters are ready for the dry season and increased risk of forest fires. Yeah, because as it said there, the precipitation level and temperatures will impact the likelihood of a forest fire, so that's pretty cool and realistic. But let's have a look at the image. Cool. Looks really good. Again, the trees look so much better than they did in the first game. So I'm really happy to see that. The helicopters as well look very real. That city in the background is just gorgeous, to be honest. That is absolutely beautiful and just showcases kind of how massive these maps are, because you could never get that far away and see that much city in Vanilla Cities 1. So to even have the capacity to have a view like this is absolutely incredible. And the fire actually looks a lot better than it did in Cities 1 as well. Cool. And now we get into our second type of natural disaster, the hailstorm. When the weather is cold but not freezing, there's a possibility of a hailstorm occurring. Hailstorms cause physical damage to buildings but do not destroy them. The damaged buildings need to be repaired after the storm, and the money and resources for those repairs come from the residents, taking away from means that would usually go to building upkeep and leveling. A hailstorm can also cause traffic accidents, which of course interrupts the traffic flow. The citizens don't need to evacuate, but they prefer staying indoors during a hailstorm. Okay, so that's kind of interesting. They did tell us a long time ago that money and resources go towards a building's upkeep and eventual leveling. So these hailstorms can come through and require repairs that I guess takes away from that pool of money and resources and slows the potential of those buildings to level. But other than that, it doesn't sound like it's too catastrophic in the way the next one we're going to get into, tornadoes, might be. So kind of one of those lowercase d disasters they were talking about in the featured highlights video, rather than a capital D disaster when it comes to hailstorms. But lastly, we do get into the tornado. So the tornado is the most extreme natural disaster included in Cities Skylines 2. It affects citizens, vehicles, and buildings and can cause serious damage to them as it moves through the city. The buildings can get damaged or even destroyed by the tornado, citizens can get injured or die, and a lot of traffic accidents tend to happen in the area the tornado hits. The best way to prepare for extreme natural disasters is by placing small and large emergency shelters in your city so that they are easily reachable for citizens. The early disaster warning system can spot approaching natural disasters and inform citizens earlier to go to the shelters in time to avoid the disaster. The citizens will run to the shelters, and the large emergency shelters feature evacuation buses that are deployed at the same time as the evacuation order. The evacuation buses will plan their path based on population density, prioritizing schools, medical clinics, and hospitals. Cool, that's interesting. And here we have this massive tornado. It says emergency shelters keep your citizens safe while a tornado sweeps through the city. And yep, again, beautiful, beautiful city. I would be absolutely fuming if this thing was coming for my city. But again, if that's the kind of thing you like, you know, we all play the game in different ways. More power to you. I'm glad it's an option. And who knows, maybe I will play with it a little more in Cities 2 than I ever did in the first game. After all, you can have multiple save files, so it doesn't have to be too catastrophic. With or without disasters enabled, weather affects your city and its inhabitants, and the map you choose to build your city brings about different challenges for you to handle. Which of these features are you most excited about? Cool. And as that's the end of the dev diary, that also brings us to the end of our Climate and Seasons dev diary video. So there's a lot new coming with Climate and Seasons in Cities Skylines 2, as well as some new depth to certain things we already had in the game. I have a few concerns with the night and season cycle, whether or not we can turn that on and off. I did mention, of course, we can turn on and off disasters, but I didn't really say anything about the night cycle, and I imagine it might not be optional, just the way that the Climate and Seasons appear to be sort of tuned into that same mechanic, that it would require the day and night cycle to pass for the season and annual cycle to kind of keep going as well. But who knows, we'll just have to see when it comes. It might not be a huge deal anyway. I might like playing in the night more than I did in the first game. We'll just have to see. But overall, in any case, I'm pretty optimistic about all of it and can't wait to get my hands on it come October. But with that said, I want to hear what everybody else thinks. Overall, are you guys happy with what we know now about Climate and Seasons in Cities Skylines 2? And if you're still here with us at this point in the video, please leave a comment and let us know which climate you want to build your city in first. And lastly, I truly appreciate you hanging out with me today and want to encourage you to consider subscribing again if you haven't already, and to hit that like button if you enjoyed today's video or found it informative. And of course, if you did not enjoy the video, feel free to leave a dislike as well. But with all that said, I want to thank you again, and I hope you all have a great day.